Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good day or good evening, whichever time you're going to watch this video. Welcome to our next training video in Luke 15, 1 to 32. Read the passage beforehand, pray, and let's get to it. But let's begin with Luke 15, and it's important actually. Verses 1 to 2 is quite important because it sets the scene. This is the audience Jesus is talking to, and you immediately see there are tax collectors and sinners, and the Pharisees and teachers of the law. There's a dual audience. Of course, the disciples would be sitting in here, but these are the two that are highlighted. And if you've been reading Luke's gospel, there's already a narrative regarding the Pharisees and teachers of the law and the tax collectors and sinners. And I've just highlighted two chapters for you, chapter 5 and 7. So in chapter 5, for example, the Pharisees and teachers of the law, when they saw Jesus eating with sinners or tax collectors and sinners, they were complaining. They complained about it. Similarly, in Luke 7:39, when Simon, the Pharisee who invited Jesus, saw that a sinful woman touched Jesus, he was not enarmed with Jesus, as he sort of thought to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him, what kind of woman she is, that she's a sinner. And we see also that Jesus' ministry, apart from this sort of resistance and criticism from the Pharisees and teachers of the law, he did eat and dine with tax collectors and sinners. He was calling them. We see that in Luke 5. The very people they were complaining about, we read that then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. And Jesus tells the Pharisees that, you see, his mission is, if you think of Luke 4, is I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance, sinners to come home, to turn back. And his association with this group has been so distinct that people like the teachers and Pharisees were criticizing him and gossiping about him, saying like in Luke 7:39, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. So those are the two audiences Jesus has been dealing with. But to both he's given the call and invitation. Luke 13:24, make every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter it and will not be able to. There's that call to enter the narrow door. But in Luke 14, of course, while he was eating with the Pharisees, he actually gave them a parable regarding the banquet. And there's an invite. As he says, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. There's a call and invitation to both groups. The tax collectors were responding, but not the Pharisees. And that's the background we need to know for the parable of the two lost brothers and the forgiving father. But with the younger brother, very quickly, just to mention, as you can see, Jesus sets the scene. There was a man who had two sons, those two audiences. And the younger one said to his father, Father, give me a share of the estate, which was the most shocking thing to say. It's basically saying, I want you dead, rather have your things than you. And then, of course, verse 13, once he got what he wanted, he set off to a distant country. He wanted to be as far away from his father as he could be. And that, in essence, is really the heart of the rebel, the amoral, the irreligious, is God, I want everything you've got, but I don't want you. I want everything that you can offer, but without you. I want to live my life as I want, when I want, for myself, without you. But, as verse 14 to 16 point out, the aftermath of this decision, this life decision, is destitution, brokenness, ruin. We actually see that here. For example, he was in deep need in the end. And very importantly, he hired himself to a citizen. That would be a Gentile. He was tending the fields to feed pigs. That's an unclean animal. And not good memories for Jews regarding pigs. If you think of the Maccabean revolt and other things as well. It's an unclean animal. It's a symbol of how low you can go. And we see in verse 16 that he was longing to eat what the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So the unclean animals are much better taken care of than him. That's low. He's a washout. He's a dropout. He's a loser. He's scum. But the key is, if we think of the call and invitation of Jesus, it's verses 17 to 20. That's not where the younger brother stays. He came to his senses. He heard the call, if I can put it that way, of repentance. He recognized his father's kindness. and his love, if you think about how he cared for the servants, and then he resolved, knowing who his father is, to go back. That's repentance. And he humbled himself when he said, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. Look at that. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He's turned back to his father in complete humility. And so he went back. And then, of course, it's the father's turn. And he is actually central to the passage. And if you think about the two parables before, it sort of sets up for us already how the Father would respond, because Jesus has already highlighted that the heavens would be rejoicing over one sinner who repents. They will be rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. God pursues the lost in love, and when he finds them, when they return back to him, there's tremendous joy. And we actually see that in the Father, but in a shocking way. I mean, the first verse, verse 20, is really countercultural. No elder father like this would run to his son, basically lift up his skirts, show his legs like a boy and run, throw his arms around him and kiss him with such overflowing emotion and affection. But it's exactly because he loved his son. He pursued him. And then when the son was completely taken aback, he did his little prayer. But the father actually interrupts him. And look at that. The word quick is lovely because it shows instant restoration. The son is immediately elevated back to sonship, and his restoration is celebrated with the fattened calf, which would have been used on the Day of Atonement or other special celebrations in the year. This is a big occasion. The son is back. And that's the father's heart for the lost. There's rejoicing. But the sting in the tail in the parable is really the older brother, who represents the Pharisees and teachers of the law, or the religious, the good people, the upright people. He was doing his honest day's labor, and when he came back, he heard that his brother is back and that he's celebrated in the best possible way. And notice, just like the Pharisees and teachers of the law, he was angry. And he refused to go in. He was shaming his father that he refused to rejoice with his father. And so his father went out. Look at this, very key. His father went out and pleaded with him, just like the father went out to the younger brother to embrace him. Now the father's going out to plead with him. He's lost. And then notice in verses 29 to 30 is the son's response. It reveals his heart. Firstly, the derogatoriness of it. He only calls his father you wherever he goes and speaks about it. He never calls him father anymore. Even the son of yours, he completely disassociates with his father and his younger brother. And notice as well is he firstly puts down his merits. I deserve it. I am slaving for you and I never disobeyed your orders. And look what he wants. I want a young goat to celebrate with his friends. This fattened calf. He wants the same things as the younger brother, but he chose a different route. He wanted to manipulate his father, earn his father's stuff. He too, in the end, wanted nothing to do with the father. And this passage is open-ended. The father invites the older brother to come in and celebrate with them, but we hear nothing of the older brother's response. That's because in verses 1 to 2, and actually through all of Luke's gospel, the Pharisees and teachers of the law are still standing outside. They're not responding to the call. They're not taking up the invite. And Jesus asking them, are you going to come in? And so what you want your people to walk away with, of course, is firstly just the heart of God for the lost, but also the fact that we need to emulate the Father's heart. The church, the heart of the church and the heart of God should be the same. People, when they walk in to your house or into the church gathering, wherever they find themselves, they must see the heart of God in what we do and say and in our attitudes. But then, of course, who are the lost? It's younger and older brothers, good and bad people, upright people and not so upright people, religious and irreligious people. Everyone is lost without the Father, and everyone is pursued by the Father and His Son, Jesus. And that, I would say, is Luke 15, 1 to 32. Such an important passage, and I pray it would be a blessing to you.